Record on this. Hey everybody, it's Jess and Peter here. We just wanted to do a quick check-in as June 15th is right around the corner. And so we just kind of wanted to, just jump on, I guess, this Zoom or this YouTube and just kind of go over some things that everyone should be, just ready for and prepared for. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about, and I'm sure that you guys are kind of tired of hearing this from us, but please go in and make sure your university athlete profiles are up to date. They are current. They have your contact information, correct cell phone, correct email, correct info for your recruiting coordinator, coaches, all of it. Make sure that it is accurate, it is updated, and it is current. Please do not assume. Please make sure you go in and actually check this. So with that, Peter, I'll kind of let you kind of start talking about just kind of what to expect and how to kind of manage some expectations on June 15th.
Yeah, so of course, this Zoom is geared towards the class of 2024, and a lot of you may feel excitement about June 15th, and some of you may feel a lot of anxiety about June 15th coming. And so we're going to kind of talk about managing expectations here, how to deal with this process, and kind of go through the different situations you may find yourself in, which could be getting a lot of contacts from coaches or getting no contacts from coaches. And so we'll kind of, talk you through that. Parents will talk to you about your role here, and we'll kind of answer some questions that over the last 2 years since this rule went into effect of June 15th, that have been constant. And so we'll address those to make sure that you guys are very well prepared. So so June 15th is all about managing expectations. And what I mean by that is there's so much buildup because of this rule with that date in mind. And it's not necessarily something that we as recruiting coordinators love or college coaches love, because it puts a lot of pressure on kids. And so when you have this buildup and you're just waiting for June 15th to come along, it can go a lot of different ways. And so, what we've seen is that by having to sort of, kids who don't get to hear a little bit about managing expectations tend to create timelines in their head. What we want you to think about is that June 15th is a launch point for your recruiting process here. This is not an end point. Jess would probably agree with me when I say that the vast majority of athletes end up at a school that they did not talk to the week of June 15th. Maybe that they didn't even talk to until they're late in their junior year or senior year. So what happens in this first week of open contact, it does not define you. So with managing expectations comes that sort of pressure, that self-pressure that a lot of young athletes put on themselves with the timeline piece. Every school also manages this, their process different, and they have different timelines for building relationships. Some may offer right away. Some may not offer until after camps or until after visits, or certainly maybe after seeing you play again at nationals. There's no one size fits all for June 15th that will apply to all kids and all programs. But the best piece of advice that we can give you is to not create timelines in your head. And we know that is sometimes a lot easier said than done due to the pressures felt through social media or your club gyms or your high school gyms or through seeing your friends commit. We just want to reiterate, and you've heard us say it before, that comparison is the thief of joy. This is your process. You shouldn't worry about what anyone else's process looks like. You shouldn't worry about where they're going or the amount of time it takes for them to get an offer or to make a commitment, because that's their process. There's no saying what, if someone else is making the right choice or if things are going to end up changing for them down the line. So all you can focus on is yourself, your process, and not putting that sense of urgency on you. When the time is right for offers to come your way, they're going to come your way. And I think if you would ask any of our previous hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of athletes that have committed that we've worked with at my recruiting assistant, who didn't commit early in their process, or at least into their high school or following club season, they would all tell you that the self induced anxieties they provided through that sense of urgency for a commitment were all silly. It was not worth it, because the only thing that's going to matter in the end is that you got to, from point A where you're starting, point B, which is your goal of a verbal commitment. And it doesn't matter if it's a straight line to get there, it happens fast. It doesn't matter if it goes up and down and backwards and back to start, as long as you end up where you're supposed to be and ending up somewhere where you are going to be so successful on and off the court, where you found a cultural fit, a social fit, you have found, a coaching staff and a program that you love with strong academic programs. It's really got to be the whole fit and not just about volleyball. So again, try not to, compare your process to anybody else. You're going to see kids commit. You're going to see kids commit who you maybe feel that you're more talented than, or you don't understand why them and not you. Again, don't feed into those thoughts. Remember, it's your process, and the only thing that matters is what's happening in your process.
Here, I'm gonna kind of step into, like, I it's important for everyone to understand, like, there are going to be folks on June 15th that, they're going to receive 100 plus calls, emails, text messages, all of it. And there's going to be some that maybe get one or two or don't even hear from anyone on June 15th. Part of this is going to be determined by the level you are. Part of it's going to be determined on how much effort you have previously put into your recruiting process. There's a lot that goes into it. So, I like what Peter said is this is kind of like a launch of just where you're starting out. So, and it's going to dictate kind of what your next steps are. And I always caution people, be careful of, kind of wishing that you were in someone else's shoes, because any side of this recruiting process that you're on, if you're a kid that's receiving 100 plus calls, or if you're someone who, maybe received, one or two or didn't hear anything, it's all challenging. The challenges are just different. And parents, I want to caution you guys here, because I know sometimes, as well-intentioned as parents are, and you guys kind of want to, maybe find out where your kid's at, and want to ask other parents, like, hey, who did you hear from? Or, did your daughter hear anything? And sometimes it, as well-intentioned as it may be, just remember that for the kid who maybe didn't hear from their top school, or, didn't hear from anything, like that June 15th date may be a little bit challenging. So I think it's just best to make sure that we're all being sensitive, to the fact that everybody's, recruiting timeline is going to be different, and there's no right or wrong in this process. Just it's a starting point, and that'll kind of give us the information on what our next steps, will need to be.
And if you're someone who, gets through the first week and you haven't heard from a single coach, and you start self-reflecting on, like Jess said, the effort that you have or have not put into this process, you have two choices. And one is to sort of, feel bad for yourself and mope that nothing's happened, or you can be proactive, because it doesn't matter if you haven't done anything yet, as long as you get in touch with us and you develop a plan and you get to work. So again, not being contacted right away. Again, some people may not be contacted until after nationals. It just doesn't matter, but you do have to put the work in. It is not, recruiting is not something that will happen from coaches just finding you, just discovering you by accident. That is such a minuscule percentage of college volleyball players. So you've got to dedicate yourself to this work. And like I said, for most kids, this process is up and down and left and right, and then back to start again. And that's what it looks like for most people. And so you've got to be dedicated to knowing that that's going to happen. There's going to be ups. There's going to be way more downs than ups likely, for the average athlete. And you just got to say, all right, but I'm moving forward. And so again, that's just kind of part of my spiel.
All right. So next up, we'll talk about kind of what the purpose is of these calls. And I think that everybody kind of has the expectation of, oh, these calls are to get offers out immediately. And that, I would say, that's really not the case. And I think especially after COVID, I think COVID changed a lot. I guess maybe the purpose of June 15th, I think it put a lot more emphasis on relationship building. And so I think more so these calls are, really just an introduction, like, hey, here's our program, kind of get to know you a little bit, see if there might be a mutual interest, in that. So it's important to remember that recruiting is relationship building. And I think that this is the first part of building that relationship. Peter, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I like to call them like the get to know yous, and it's not it's not exactly like a job interview in a sense, but what it is a chance for both the coaching staff and for you as the athlete to get to know each other and see if you're going to be fits for that culture. They want to know that that you're someone that can come in and step in and be a part of their culture. You're not going there to create a culture. And on your end, you want to do your vetting and make sure that these coaches are people that you can see as your leaders for 4 years, and that what they can offer you in terms of understanding more about the school and the program and the direction of the program, that's something that not something you like, but something that you hear and you go, yeah, like that speaks to me. There's a big difference between having that drive and that fire when you talk to these coaches and what they say versus just saying, well, okay, yeah, it wasn't bad. I guess there wasn't anything that, like you want to find those coaches that sort of ignite you in this process.
What I've always found interesting on June 15th is I always kind of see a big shift, that happens among athletes. So they'll start, really just getting on the phone and kind of learning. I think everyone kind of starts off with their big wish list. And then once the schools come through and you start, hearing about what's going on in their programs or what is offered at their school, or, just these different things that are specific to all these individual programs. And I love it because you can start to see like the wheels turning almost. And, you get excited about some things, and you're going to start to learn a lot. You're going to learn that maybe something that was, that you thought was important early on, may not necessarily be something, that's important to you, in college or for your life. So I think these are a great opportunity to just kind of really start ironing out like what it is that you want, and from a coach perspective, from a culture perspective, from a school, location, dorms, I mean, all of it. If you can get past the stressful moment and kind of take this as like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like I get to learn about all these different programs. I think it's kind of exciting in that way. Once you kind of get past the, being intimidated. So, Peter, let's start off, just with, maybe some advice if you're on the spectrum of where you are maybe getting a lot of calls, or emails or contact on June 15th. I think some of the best ways, I think it's always important to be organized. Have a notebook, after you get off the phone with these coaches, make sure to write everything down. Because once you jump from call to call, it's really easy to forget if you're on like maybe your third call of the day to, remember what happened on the first. So I think having some spaced out time, so you're not overwhelmed. I think limiting the amount of calls that you take per day. Sometimes you may feel pressured to, have a conversation with a lot of different schools, and that gets overwhelming, and really nobody has time for that. So limit your calls to, I would say 3 is a good number. If you have to stretch it to 4, you can, but, just make sure that it's something that you're comfortable with and you're not feeling overwhelmed, that you feel a little bit more in the driver's seat.
And you've got to space, yeah, and you've got to space these calls out because you don't know if it's going to be a 10-minute call or if it's going to be an hour and a half. And you will get calls, you may get calls out of the blue. And of course, you're going to be picking it up because, it could be a coach. And So I guess I'm trying to think of a great way to phrase this, but sometimes you may need a little bit of, an exit strategy. If, you're not sure who's calling you, you may be getting a call from someone else around that time, or, a coach calls and you've got something scheduled 10 minutes from then, be honest, let them know, hey coach, I'm working through a lot of, contacts right now. I have some things lined up here. Would it be okay if I got back to you later this evening with some times that would be good for us to talk? You do not have to do everything right away. But kind of along those same lines, again, we're kind of talking about people who may get a lot of contacts through text, email, calls, whatever it is. Yeah, you've got to manage it. Sometimes there's a little bit of priority. If you're hearing from your dream schools, you may want to set up those calls first. There may be schools that you just have absolutely zero interest in whatsoever. And what I would do is I would have a sort of line or two that you can put together that lets coaches know, with full transparency, sort of where you stand, that you appreciate them reaching out. You wanted to be transparent that, right now, and again, you want to say this appropriately, but that, maybe that you have your priorities sort of lie elsewhere. And I always think that what you can do is always add in, if you'd like, coach, if anything changes on my end, I will be sure to reach out to you, immediately. And that, kind of leaves the door open, but it also is respectful in the sense that coaches will appreciate knowing that they should spend their time elsewhere. And just know that, you just may not be able to respond to everything. And so I would kind of work through things, your top schools you can respond to first. And again, when you talk about sort of strategies for management here, if a coach emails you or texts you and, they want to hop on the phone that day, where you're just like, wow, I'm overwhelmed right now, you can always respond and say, hey coach, I just wanted to acknowledge that I've received your message. I'm working through a lot of contacts right now, and I will be in touch as soon as I can. And simply lets them know you're responsible, that you care enough to let them know that you received their message. It's something that you can essentially copy and paste, and there's no danger of what's said, or like accidentally putting a school name in or something. But again, and if you are one of those kids, feel free to lean on us and ask us, hey, I'm overwhelmed, I'm trying to figure out how to manage this right now. Certainly we can help you through that.
And parents, I think that there's you can kind of step in here too to maybe help, if it's just if they create the template on responding, to a certain, type of school. Maybe it's a school on I don't know, the East Coast, and you want to stay, kind of close to home where you're at. Maybe you can come in and just help, kind of filter out some of that stuff. So I think that's okay to do if there's a lot of volume. Like, we really want the athlete to be in charge of their process, but sometimes with June 15th, just because there's so much volume that comes in, it can be very overwhelming, to kind of navigate everything and keep things straight. Parents, you guys typically are a lot more organized sometimes than teenagers. So being able to come in and just help them, be very careful that you're not stepping on toes, still let them be in the driver's seat, but be available, to them if they need, to bounce ideas off of you, or if they, need your assistance and just kind of cutting through the volume, or, helping them stay organized. Peter, what are some, things for those who maybe aren't getting, maybe they only have like one or two, or maybe they don't hear from anyone on June 15th. I know sometimes that can, kind of be a little bit of a dagger to the heart, and you kind of go through that self-doubt and you're like, oh my gosh, like, does nobody want me? And I'm not going to go play to college. Like, please do not buy into those lies. I would say for those of you that have the national tournament, like, let this fire you up. Most of the time, if a coach is not reaching out, they may not know about you. They may not know that you've existed. If you feel like you've put a lot of effort, and that means you're communicating, every couple weeks, you have a large target list, not one that's just, 10 to 15 Power 5 schools. If you have a big list that, has a lot of different options on it, get to work. It's time to get to work. If you want to be recruited, you've got to put yourself out there. And, before nationals is a great time to do it, whether or not you're going to AAUs or you're going to USAV nationals. Those are great opportunities to get in front of coaches, because the amount of coaches that will be there, those are the two largest events, that are attended by college coaches. So a great opportunity, but they're not going to walk into a gym and just find you. So you have to make sure that you are doing the work, and that you are staying active, and that you are constantly communicating, to get yourself on folks' radars. Peter, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the very first thing is, again, like kind of that mental health side, like you alluded to, is first of all, be like, okay, acknowledge, like, I got no calls, or I got one or two calls, and it was, maybe it's from schools in a division that you aren't interested in. Okay, so maybe that hurts your ego a little bit, but again, what are your choices, right? It's to sulk, or it's to say, all right, time to fire up, like time to get to work. Like, if this is truly a goal of mine, if I want to take every opportunity possible, especially like Jess said, going into these last two tournaments where we'll probably have over 600 coaches or schools at each of these events, the opportunity is there for you. You have to take advantage. So even if you're, feeling like, hey, I haven't done anything, still not sure where to start. I mean, look back at our previous emails that we've sent, the resources in our drive. For those of you that have the access to those, of course, make sure that you're utilizing us, communication with us through this process. We say it every time we get on here. Communication isn't texting hello once every 2 months. It's constant communication. It's letting us know what your needs are. It's letting us know when you're overwhelmed. It's letting us know when you need something to do. And even if you are really proactive and you're like, hey, I need something to do, or what should I do next? All those kinds of things. So and if you're one of those athletes that's hearing this and saying, shoot, I probably haven't worked hard enough for this, guess what? You still got 2 weeks until June 15th. So get your video out, start emailing coaches, send them your remaining schedule, send them your video, let them know your, current GPA, if you know what you want to study, all of those things, there's still time. So again, you gotta grab the bull by the horns, and you gotta dive in, or you're going to sit back and put your toes in the water, and you're going to hope. And hope is not a successful strategy for the recruiting process.
And I would say for those kind of jumping to, if you fall somewhere in the middle, or if you have, a few options come to the table, don't take anything off. Even if you're looking at the options and you're like, oh, I don't have any interest, take advantage of learning about different programs, learning and starting to line up some different things that you might be interested in. And you'd be surprised, like Peter and I have mentioned many times already on this, the list and the goal changes and throughout the entire recruiting process. And that comes from knowledge, and that comes from learning. So when you're going through this, allow yourself to grow, allow yourself to go through those conversations with coaches, ultimately as many as you can. I think it's a great opportunity. But I wouldn't necessarily take anything off that list just yet. If you're kind of somewhere in the middle, if you have, some schools kind of, come in. So, Peter, are there any thoughts that come to your mind just on some general things, that they need to be prepared for? So one of the things that I like to mention is just making sure that you have a list of questions prepared, because that's one thing that coaches are always probably going to ask, hey, do you have any questions? And they're going to go through this long spiel most of the time and tell you, about their program, tell you about their kids, tell you about their school. So try to have a variety of questions in there, as it relates to the team, as it relates to practices, team culture, balancing, class life, Maybe you can even ask about the school, the location, you know, what are their dorms like? What are their coaching styles like? You know, there's so many different parts of this that you can ask questions on. Obviously, if you need help, please feel free to reach out to Peter or myself, and, you know, we'll help you kind of get some of those prepared. But write those down. Don't just think you're going to have them in your head, because what happens is when you get on the phone call, you're going to forget. So it's just, if you have them there, you can just write them down. I've had athletes print out their questions and, you know, have them on little sheets when they go through June 15th, and they just write down the answers. So they have it organized, whatever your system is. But, you know, make sure that you have those questions prepared. And the next thing I want to say is be ready to communicate back. As a college coach myself, I've been on some painful recruiting calls where you're trying to engage the athlete, you're trying to ask them some questions, and you're getting like, you know, how was your day? And they're like, great. Okay. You know, how was your volleyball practice? It's good. Okay, where are you at in the recruiting process? Talking to some schools. Like, engage back and forth. You know, try to have more than just a, you know, 1 or 2 word answers. You know, ask them questions back, you know, so you want to be engaging on the conversation. You want to, you know, keep it going. And I know that when you're nervous, sometimes that, you know, your mind can freeze, but that's what's really important about having those questions down, you know. So if a coach is asking you, you know, about your practice, you know, maybe have some things kind of written down ahead of time. I think one of the things that Peter likes to talk about is just being prepared to, you know, talk about yourself on those calls. So Peter, I'll let you kind of touch base on that.
Yeah, and that can be an uncomfortable thing for a lot of people. I know that even today, like if I think about going to, you know, an interview or talking with a new club director or talking to a group of athletes, you know, like I don't think that anyone truly enjoys just talking about themselves, but it's something you've got to get comfortable with. And the recruiting process in general is about, you know, kind of getting uncomfortable or getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And so, you know, coaches want to know, they really do want to know the fun things. They want to know, you know, what your favorite color is. And, you know, do you have animals? They want to know about your family. They want to know what you do outside of volleyball. What hobbies do you have? You know, do you have what passions? You know, what do you want to be when you grow up in terms of work? I mean, goals that you have. I mean, everything. They want to know that stuff. And what you can do when you're, you know, saying all those things, and again, prep this stuff ahead of time. Be over prepared instead of under prepared. And because if something doesn't come up in the first call, it very likely will in the next one. But, you know, be prepared to say all of those, you know, great fun things outside of volleyball, but also be prepared to market yourself, to sell yourself. What do you bring to a program? Those of you who have worked, you know, with me personally in this process, I know, you know, on the very first phone call that I always have, you know, one of the questions, you know, we talk about a lot, you know, is, you know, how would your teammates and coaches describe you? What characteristics would they use to describe you? And that's a great way to get some insight into what you can bring to a program, what a coaching staff can count on in bringing you in, that's going to fit their culture. So certainly, like I said, be prepared to talk about yourself. Again, that's how a coaching staff is going to really gravitate towards you, and want to continue to pursue you in this process.
And if you don't have an answer to a question, it's totally okay to say, "Oh, I've never thought about that. That's a great question." Or, you know, maybe I need some more time to kind of think and get back to you on that. Make sure you do get back to them on that question. You know, so don't feel like you necessarily have to have a well put together answer. If you don't, that's okay. You know, I still have a lot of athletes right now that are in the 23 class that are still trying to figure out what it is that they want. You know, you don't have to know today, or you don't have, I guess on June 15th, you don't have to know on June 15th what it is that you're entirely looking for in a program. But if you have an idea, and also that's okay if it changes along the way too. So kind of want to give some permission there.
Jess, while we're kind of talking about some of those, you know, do's in terms of being prepared,
Yeah.
let's also talk about maybe a couple things that are maybe don'ts. And
Ooh,
what
I've
else?
got a good one. I've got a good one.
You want to go first
Okay.
or me?
I'm gonna go
Yeah,
first. Okay.
don't steal my thunder.
Yeah, I am stealing your thunder. Make sure, okay, when you are in these calls, make sure that you are in a place where you have no distractions. So if you have a dog that's very active, or, if you're at the gym around your friends, like go to a quiet place, try to make sure that you're going to be in a spot where you're not going to have any distractions, where you're going to have good service. That's also another thing. Um, I have been on a few of those calls where it's like there's no cell service, or they're in their car with their friends and they can't, and it's just you can't get anything done that way.
I was gonna be mad if you took mine, but I think my number one is coaches are going to ask you about, your high school season or your club season and how things are going. And sometimes it may not be going well for a lot of different reasons. But one giant red flag is ever throwing a coach under the bus, or a teammate, or complaining about playing time, or, it's not going, not growing great, because you're not, coach just isn't even giving you a chance to play, or this and that. Anytime you say something like that, immediately a coach goes, that's what they're going to think in my gym. And so you've got to show, instead of that, you can talk about it, coach, it's I won't lie, it's been challenging. It's playing time has been a little hard to come by lately, but here's what I'm working on in the gym every day, whether it's a specific technique or a skill within the game, and say like I'm hungry, like, I can promise you, like, when I'm in your gym, I am not backing down if I'm not given something. Like, I know I've got to earn it. I know that I'm going to be competing with the best of the best. So you've got to take a negative and you've got to spin that into a positive. But like I said, any type of, throwing anyone under the bus or kind of making an excuse for it, is a big red flag for coaches. And let's do one for the parents as well.
Oh, wait, hold. Parents is next. I've got one more for the
Okay.
kids.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I will say, don't post this stuff on social media. That's a big, I think, is I know that happens a lot in football. The club team I coach, they were talking about how, like, football kids, they're always posting the offers and the conversations and this and that. This doesn't really necessarily happen in the volleyball world, and it can be a little bit of a turnoff. And I think while I'm on this subject, go through your social media, make sure you're doing a once over, make sure everything is appropriate, make sure everything is, clean. There's no talking bad about anyone. Nothing. Your 80-year-old grandmother should be able to go on your social media and, approve everything. That's what I like to say. But, don't post this stuff on social media, because you may be really excited about a school, but maybe your top school hasn't had the chance, and maybe they see you post about that and they could take that as like, oh, well, maybe that's where she really wants to go. And they may be turned off from, calling you or contacting you or reaching out. So it's just best to just kind of keep all this stuff to yourself, until you're ready to make, or I guess after you make your decision.
Yeah. And one more would be, and I know this sounds very simple, but don't lie. Anything from, maybe there's a reason why you're not on the court. Maybe it was a choice you made, or this or that, or, whatever it is, don't lie about that. One of the biggest ones that kids get caught with is emailing coaches and telling them about how, oh, this school is my dream school. And then you get on the phone with them and they say, hey, you mentioned in your email, like, so-and-so, our program, our school is the top of your list, tell us about that. Tell us where that, why. And kids just freeze up because they know they're caught. Like, that is a surefire way for a coach to read through and go, she's just sending that to everyone. So again, just be honest. If coaches ask you at any point, hey, who are you talking with, right? What other schools are you talking to right now? Or what are you looking for? You can be honest, you can be transparent. You don't have to lie about those things. Again, honesty is your best policy with, everything. And certainly when you're trying to gain the trust of a coaching staff to bring you in, as again, part of their culture, not to create a culture. You've got to fit what's going on there. And honesty is going to be one of the single greatest factors in a coach bringing you in, that you are a trustworthy person on and off the court.
Next, we'll go ahead and we'll kind of jump in on parents and the expectations for parents on June 15th. And the parents always feel a little awkward, I think, just because it's, the first time that your kid's really getting to kind of dive into and start building the relationships on this. So as a parent, you're kind of sitting back and you're like, okay, there's my baby. And I know sometimes it's hard to kind of watch them spread their wings, but my reminder to parents is, you have done such a great job of investing in your child, and preparing them for moments like this, so allow them to spread their wings, allow them, the autonomy to go through this process. A couple things that I like to kind of have parents to do, make sure you're not taking over the phone calls. There's not a college coach in the country, mom and dad, who want to hear from you on June 15th right away. They want to get to know your kid. Is it okay? I've had some parents sometimes, like maybe through kind of the first couple calls, like, is it okay for me to be in the room? Is it okay for me to be sitting, right there on the call? And I think, my advice is always like, let your kid get through the first couple of calls. Like if they're in the dining room and the kitchen's right next and you can kind of hear, I think that's a good thing. Cause then you can hear if you're, maybe your kid's not great or not super comfortable on the phone, and you need to they need to circle with us, and we kind of need to, talk over on how to do a little bit better on those phone calls. Or maybe that there's something that a coach says that's a little bit off-putting sometimes, and you're like, I don't feel comfortable with that. That does happen sometimes. So I think, it's okay to be an earshot, but don't necessarily be hovering, because that's also going to make them nervous too.
Yeah, there's going to be a time and place for calls with the family or Zooms with the family when they're going to want to and know about mom and dad and what you guys do for work and what life was like growing up with mom and dad and things like that. And there's, again, it's a time and place, but these first calls are get to know yous with the athletes. And the single biggest thing these coaches want to see is an athlete who can drive their own process, an athlete that they know can handle their business. And just like on the court, like you may say something that's you're like, oh, that's not how I wanted to word it, or like that's not what I meant. And that's bound to happen. Like we're not going to lie and say there's no pressure on any of these calls or anything, but you don't have to be perfect, and it's okay to make a mistake, and you'll learn from those. If you can just sense like, oh my gosh, like my kid said that she was so prepared, and boy, I can tell she did no preparation, that's going to be a learning moment. And sometimes learning moments can be tough, but again, it's like if you haven't done anything in the recruiting process till now, it's live in what you haven't done, or work to become what you want to be. So you can talk with them after those calls, but certainly don't, like just said, don't be jumping into the call. And if a coach were to ever say, hey, our mom and dad there, do they want to jump in for a minute and say hello, like that's a totally different story. They can come get you, but we can tell you when we talk red flags, I'll never forget a call that I got from a coach that said, I said, hey, how did the first call go? And said, oh, I didn't really learn much about so-and-so, but I learned all about mom and dad. And that's something that can drive them away a little bit. So just be a little bit cognizant of that.
I think parents, some of these June 15th, or as you're kind of navigating through the summer too, I think it is a good time to just kind of connect and be on the same page as a family, just in terms of, what you're comfortable with, location wise, school wise. Is the school near an airport? Is it, close to a family member? Is it, super far away where it's 3,000 miles and, it's going to take a long time? The financial piece, what that looks like with your family. So I think it's good to kind of connect on that before June 15th, just so you can kind of have an idea. What if your kid gets a call from a school in Alaska and is super jazzed about it? And you're like, I don't feel comfortable with you going to Alaska. Just try to maybe kind of navigate some of those expectations ahead of time. And then, be prepared if maybe some of these programs want to start moving a little bit faster, I think it's good for parents to kind of step in and have those conversations on, campus safety, or, what happens if my kid gets hurt? What happens if something happens to us as parents? Don't open the door of finances until, an offer has been put on the table. But, once that has been put on the table, or, once that has been solidified, you definitely want to have that conversation as a parent. So, there will be a time for you guys to step in and to have those conversations. And you need to make sure as a parent that you are comfortable when your kid is ready to make that decision. But it just may not necessarily be on that June 15th date. So one of the things I wanted to kind of go over is, I don't think this happens as much as it used to, Peter, but it does still happens. What happens if you get an offer on June 15th, or what happens if a school is like super pressuring you and you're like on the phone, and every 5 minutes they're like, okay, so like, are you ready to commit, or have you made your decision? Kind of any thoughts? I mean, I usually tell athletes, thank you, like, be gracious. But definitely, put it back. I think this is a great time to put it back on your parents and say, hey, I cannot, make a decision without talking to my parents first. So I think it gives you a little bit of time. Anything else that you want to kind of talk about?
Yeah, I think when this rule began with the 22 class, those were athletes who had a lot of previous contact with coaches. They had been in gyms with them. They had been to camps. They had developed relationships with them. That's a completely different story than the 99% of this 2024 class. Building these relationships is so important, and you do have to be wary sometimes of a school throwing an offer out with an extremely short or limited timeline, that sometimes schools do know that that's their best chance at you. When you give your verbal commitment, again, it's so much more than just the volleyball. This is about the volleyball. It's about the coaches. And even with coaches, they could very well be gone for one reason or another by the time you get there. And so you can't just put all of your eggs in that basket of this coaching staff. It's got to be the academics. It's got to be the social and cultural fit. It's got to be a financial fit for your family, distance, geography. It's so much more than just the volleyball. And if you're finding yourself in a pressured situation with a very short timeline, first of all, contact us. We'll work you through it. We're going to tell you to take a deep breath. We'll deal with that as that comes. But just know that you do not have to accept an offer just because it's given to you. Even if it's from a school that's, at the top of your list, but you're still like, I just don't know enough. You've got to be 100% behind your decision when you give it.
Mike, jump in, like looking at my notes here. Following June 15th, Peter, or I guess I won't say following June 15th, but like when getting off the phone calls, I think there's one thing that I know that you always say to the athletes that I love, and I think it's great, but just saying, what are the next steps, keeping that door open and following up. And so you kind of know what you need to do, because sometimes it's hard when you get off the phone and you're like, okay, so now what?
So the gray territory, right? Yeah. So if you end your call by saying, first of all, thanking them for their time, and but what are our next steps and what do you need from me? That puts the direction on them to say, hey, this coach is going to reach out to you next, or I'd like you to reach out to this coach, or can you send us some new, or some new film, or send us when you get your schedule, they have all your schedules through UA, but let's just say hypothetically, like, oh, send us your schedule when it's released for, maybe they just want to see if you're organized, and if you can complete a simple task like that they ask. Maybe, hey, let's connect after nationals. But again, it kind of puts the ball in their court so that you don't end up getting off the phone going, well, what's next? And then a week or two later, you haven't heard from them and you're like, I don't know, should I reach out? Shouldn't I reach out? Do they like me? Do they not like me? Where do I stack? Blah, blah, blah. Like, again, you want to avoid all those head games. So control what you can control. And that is something that you can use to your advantage, to help dictate like, or let them dictate what's next for you?
I think one of the hardest things about June 15th that I've kind of come across, and I don't know that there's necessarily a good answer here for the sophomore class, but is camps in the summer. Because I know that the camp schedule for a lot of colleges are released pretty early. And so you're kind of doing a little bit of a guesstimate. And then when June 15th rolls around, you might be like, oh my gosh, like none of the schools that I am going to their camps this summer called me. Doesn't necessarily mean those schools are not interested. Those schools probably do have a list of athletes that they are looking at. And if they didn't call you, you may not be on it immediately. That doesn't mean you can't work your way in. But I do think it's good that if a school reaches out to you, decisions are made at camps. So if there's a school that you really connected with on the phone, there's a lot of things that fit, your checklist, just in terms of academics, locations, volleyball level, coaching style, team culture, all that sort of stuff, definitely make an effort, to put in, to go to their camp. I think every coach is prepared for a little bit of camp shuffle movement. So you should be able to get out of the camps if you've already previously signed up, if you need to adjust to another one. And, my word of caution here is don't go to 8 million camps. Most of you are still doing club volleyball. I know some of you have kind of started at least, tryouts for high school. Maybe depending on your location, you're doing even some training right now with your high school team. So it's just a lot. And you just want to be cautious of, your body and just making sure you're not doing too much. But if there's a school that you're really highly interested in, please make an effort to get to their camp.
Yeah, and Justin, even at the highest levels, kind of with something you said about, a lot of decisions, can be made at camps. Certainly a coach could definitely offer you at a camp in June or July and say, you've got 24 hours, 48 hours, a week, 2 weeks, by this date. But some may even say we're tossing the offer out to you. But remember, while you can start talking to these coaches on June 15th, you're still not taking visits till August 1st. And so you very well may want to be able to do the academic tour the campus, see what school looks like, feels like, sounds like there. And again, there's some athletes who are going to feel the pressure for sure and may not get that kind of a rope to play with in terms of the length of time. But again, we'll cross those bridges when they come. But certainly just keep in mind, sorry, there's a fly buzzing around my head. But there's certainly, again, it's not something that necessarily is just going to happen right away in June, the first week. So it's a process, and just make sure that you guys, again, aren't establishing these outlandish expectations of timelines and when things do and don't have to be done by. Be proactive, stay active. Put the work in, put the time in, communicate with us, and these things are going to happen, whether it's a month from now or 3 months from now, next year, your senior year. You just have to put that dedication in, and know that there's going to be roadblocks and times when you're back to go, and you're just going to feel like you're back to the drawing board. But again, your two choices are always just sit in it and just kind of, nope, this stinks, or all right, what am I going to do about it? And you're going to be proactive. So we're here to guide you through that, remember.
And I think it's totally okay. I had some I will say, 2 high level athletes last year who got a lot of contact on June 15th. One made her decision in summer, one was not in any way, shape, or form ready to make her decision, waited until this club season. That's okay. neither one of those is wrong. They both ended up finding programs that were the right fit for them, and their timeline fit what they needed. One of them needed a little bit more time to navigate, to kind of find out, what was interested in. One kid was like, this school literally fits every single thing that I have been looking for. I love the coaching staff, school location, and that's totally okay. So again, there's no right or wrong timeline. If you feel good about making a decision, great. If you don't feel good about making a decision, that's okay too. Take the time, that you need. And sometimes that does mean you might have to walk away from an offer that seems pretty great. But, if you're trying to make a square peg fit a round hole, it's not where you're supposed to be.
There's not
Yeah.
1,400 kids on the transfer portal for no reason. And a lot of it is jumping into something and not being sold on it, being so enamored by a first offer that you take it, being scared of what might not come, and forcing yourself into what's there. If it's not right, then again, it doesn't have to be over right away. Keep looking. This fly is just throwing me off my game. Keep looking, keep reaching out to schools, find that perfect fit where you truly envision yourself. When you find it, you're going to know it.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to talk about too is, don't be surprised when schools drop off the planet after June 15th. You're like, oh, I had a great conversation with this school and then never heard from them again. That happens, unfortunately it does. I think we just kind of had a senior flag signing over at Alliance. And we did a Q&A session, and one of the seniors said, that like she ended up committing to a school that she never had a conversation with on June 15th. And didn't even really know that this school existed. And so, sometimes that does happen. Schools are trying to, get their names out, and they're trying to, kind of navigate this, really quick. And everybody handles recruiting a little different. There's some schools that take a very small group of athletes and they're going to invest all their time in those athletes. There's some schools that, are going to work in volume, and they're going to try to get their name out to as many, talented kids as they can. Neither of them is wrong. It's just, how each program handles recruiting, and it's all a little different. So, try your best to communicate and, keep that door open on your end. But don't be surprised if, a school kind of drops off the planet and you're like, I never heard from them again. So, let's see. I think that's everything that's kind of on our list to talk about. I mean, one thing I just kind of wanted to remind the parents, before we go, it's, this is going to be a stressful journey for your kid. It's also going to be a little bit stressful for you, but, try not to, try in your best effort not to, dictate, let your kid come to you. They are trying to, again, navigate. They're trying to spread their wings. They want to be able to do this and show that they're a little bit, self-sufficient on their end, but let them come to you with their questions, and be prepared to kind of sit down and talk to, I would say do more listening, and asking questions and letting them respond than talking. I think that's a great way to kind of let them navigate, let them process, let them kind of start working, through some of those things. And maybe even, specifically throw in some of those tough, challenging questions of, maybe a really good opportunity came to the table, but maybe it's a little bit farther than everyone's comfortable, but you'll allow them to go there. So, kind of talking through what that looks like, so just making sure that, you're giving them the autonomy to kind of work through that again, but you still have to be mom and dad, and you still know your kid. So we're here if we need to, kind of work through family discussions too.
And for the kids, you guys may think this is like a really awkward one, but like ask mom or dad to sit down, ask or brother or sister, friend, anyone, and have them ask you questions about yourself. Make some mock questions up that you feel coaches might ask you. I mean, go to our blog. We've written, articles about June 15th before that have questions to prepare and things like that. It might feel awkward, but if it helps you to be on the phone and be comfortable and confident in what you're saying, then you're going to crush those phone calls. So and they will get easier and easier for those of you that are a little stressed by the concept of these phone calls. But again, just remember, it's two people talking about the game they love. Like, it's very simple
I have
when you
another
think about
thing.
it like that.
Sorry, I have another thing that kind of bothers me sometimes about June 15th that we get. Will coaches contact your kid at midnight on June 15th? Some do. And that bothers me. I don't like that. But yes,
It
parents,
happens.
yeah, just parents, be prepared. Please do not let your kid have a conversation with a grown-up at midnight on June 15th. That's just weird. So I don't like it. They can wait until the next day. They can wait until this 16-year-old has had a good night's sleep and they're prepared for a conversation, but they don't need to be talking to an adult at midnight. I don't like that. So I think you don't see that necessarily as much, but it still happens.
Yeah. And obviously we can't cover 100% of what's going to come up, what questions will arise, in just this one Zoom. But again, just communicate with us. Let us know where you need help. Let us know, what you're struggling with. Let us know, if you need tasks, if how you can better stay proactive or what you can be doing. That's what we're here for, is to guide you guys through all that.
I think other than that, just be sure to enjoy it. This is a fun and exciting time in your life. And yes, it can be stressful, but it's at the same time, it is still pretty cool. So, Peter or myself, we're here for you guys if you need anything. So please, do not hesitate to reach out. I know that we do our best to really make sure that our schedules are cleared on June 15th. I would say cleared on June 15th, but then they tend to fill up pretty fast. But we're here for you guys if you need any questions answered or need anything, we're happy to kind of walk you guys through all this. So it's an exciting time.
It is. And remember, if you don't get a call or contact on June 15th or the week of June 15th or the first 2 weeks, it does not define you. It does not define your process. It does not define who you're going to be as a person or an athlete, by the time you get to college. It is all what's present. So keep your mind focused on that and know that yes, it's going to take work, but if you put the work in, good things will happen.
Awesome. Well, all right, guys, that is all that Peter and I had for you today. So hope you have a great rest of your day whenever you're watching this, and I'm sure we'll all be in touch with each other soon. Take care.
Thanks.